Hello, so here's a collection of little projects, none of which are a video in and of themselves, but they're starting to fill up my hard drive. So I've got this pond, and I wanted to move the water from that pond to a reservoir to then flow back down through a filter. This was going to be done by a coil pump, and then to drive the whole system I was going to have a wind turbine. I built the turbine, it was all PETG parts, bolts and plexiglass plates to hold all the bearing blocks and gears together. This worked really well. It's very solid construction. I was quite happy with it. But then at the conclusion of it and the turbine altogether, it turns out there isn't actually any wind at that point in the garden. So I wasn't going to build some stupid drive system to put the wind turbine somewhere else. But I mean, it made a very nice garden feature. The greenhouse has been very productive this year. Plenty of courgettes and cucumbers. I used a system of shopping bags which will hold half a bag of compost. They don't get waterlogged, and I like how the handles make them easy to move around. I did a little work on trying to make tiny fighting robots, like Robot Wars, BattleBots. When you make them big and massive and dangerous, they're really entertaining to watch, but very expensive to host matches and things because of all the safety. If you make them really tiny, the thinking is it becomes a lot easier and anyone can join in. The problem is, when you make them really tiny, hammers and pincers and all the fun kind of weapons stop being mechanically viable. And the only thing that really does damage well is spinners. And so in one hit you destroy the entire other robot. And it just sort of takes the fun out of the sport. And you can kind of see why it hasn't taken off. I spent most of the summer beekeeping this year. It was some guy's hobby I was looking after, and I can see why he didn't have the time for it, as I didn't really have the time for it either. It requires a huge amount of time beekeeping when you have more than one hive. What I can say is the mead makes it all worthwhile. Proper mead, 1 honey to 5 water, big churn, leave it warm for a month. It is wonderful stuff. Tastes just like white wine, and it's very, very drinkable. I also refined the beehive design a bit, I haven't proved them fully, so I won't have a video on that yet, but once they've had a couple years at my parents' place, I'll be able to give a definitive result as to whether they're worthwhile. To serve a bunch of other projects this year, I built this table saw. It's just a circular saw bolted to the underside of a very sturdy table, and for model making and stuff, I put a really thin blade on it. This is great. You can even put a dimmer switch in line to slow down the blade. For cutting small material, it's really nice as you're not going to reduce half the material to dust. And the cuts are just brilliant. Absolutely recommend doing this. It's great.
Yep, that's all it took.
Kites. Also kites. I recommend kites. Kites, if anyone's thought about making a kite, just go make a kite. It's great. It's just a great thing to do. Lidl, and they sell this glider. It's very little trouble to make it into an RC plane, and there's a small community on Facebook who do that, so I wanted to have a go at that myself, and yeah, it makes a good plane. Very good plane, you can fly it around and all that stuff. So I did that as well. I got my hands on a scrap 3D printer. It was just pure awful. So I decided I wanted to turn it into a plotter, and I have succeeded more or less. It would have been nice if it were a bit stiffer so I could do a bit of CNC stuff, but as it is, it's a fun exercise, and it does work fairly well. I found this jet washer at the side of the road. The general idea was to make it into a water jet cutter, but use a softer medium and lower pressures. I know fine well you'd need really high pressures and really hard garnet medium for cutting effectively, but could you cut ineffectively just very slowly with soft medium and lower pressures? The general answer is no. No, it doesn't work. There is a minimum level of power required. It's a bit like laser cutters. You drop the power level to a certain point and you barely make a dint on the material because you're not really ablating the material, you're just heating it up and the material burns. So it was nice to rule that out, but it's unfortunately it just doesn't work. And yeah, if you've got any questions about this dumb stuff, don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I sometimes answer them. Otherwise, yeah, I'll see you in the next one.